Meditation in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant was profound that night when Master Yoda felt the Force tremble around him. His eyes closed with more intensity as images began to form in his ancient mind. A dark figure, wrapped in black armor and a breathing mask, emerged from the shadows. The sound of mechanical breathing echoed like an omen of death. The dark presence carried a red lightsaber that cut through the darkness, and Yoda felt a chill run down his spine as he recognized the destructive power of that entity. The visions intensified, showing the Jedi Temple in flames. Jedi fell one by one before the relentless fury of that creature of darkness. Yoda saw younglings running through the corridors, their screams of terror echoing through the sacred walls. The masked figure advanced without hesitation, his saber tracing deadly arcs in the air. Each movement was precise, each strike was definitive. The small master tried to see more, tried to penetrate beyond the mask to identify who that being was, but the darkness was impenetrable, as if the Force itself conspired to hide its identity. Then, a word resonated through the vision like thunder: Darth Vader. The name carried weight, carried fear, carried destruction. Yoda felt that this Sith did not act alone. There was an even darker presence behind him, a manipulative force that wove the threads of destiny. The Jedi Master forced his consciousness deeper, trying to glimpse the true master behind Vader. Shadows danced in his mind, incomprehensible whispers echoed, but the face remained hidden. It was like looking through a dense fog that refused to dissipate, no matter how much he tried. Yoda opened his eyes abruptly. His breathing was irregular. The silence of the meditation chamber seemed oppressive now, loaded with the weight of revelation. His small hands trembled slightly as he leaned on his staff. For centuries, he had had visions through the Force, but none had been as disturbing as this. The destruction of the Jedi Order was not just possible, it was imminent if nothing was done. And this Darth Vader would be the instrument of that fall. But who was he? Where would he come from? And who was the master in the shadows controlling him? The Grand Master rose slowly, feeling the weight of his many years. The war with the Separatists had already brought enough suffering to the galaxy, but now he realized there was an even greater threat approaching. The Sith were plotting something grand, something that would culminate in the extinction of the Jedi. Yoda knew he could not keep these visions to himself alone. The Council needed to know, needed to prepare. But how to convince them of something so nebulous? How to explain a threat that he himself could not fully comprehend? As he walked through the empty corridors of the temple, Yoda reflected on the meaning of the name. Darth Vader. The title Darth was exclusive to the Sith, this he knew well. But Vader? What meaning did that name carry? The vision showed immense power, incomparable skill with the saber, and a connection with the Force that rivaled that of the greatest Jedi. Who could become something like that? The answer was there, hidden in the folds of the Force, but remained beyond his reach. Yoda felt that time was running out. Darkness was approaching, and he needed to act before it was too late to save the order he had dedicated his life to protecting. The following days brought constant restlessness to Yoda. He meditated repeatedly, trying to extract more information from his visions, but always ran into the same wall of darkness. During one of his meditations, something new emerged. He clearly saw two Jedi, two familiar presences that were somehow connected to Darth Vader. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. The connection was undeniable, but its nature remained obscure. Would they be victims of Vader, or was there something deeper? Yoda knew he needed to speak with them immediately. If his visions were correct, these two Jedi were fundamental pieces in the puzzle he was trying to assemble. Yoda summoned Obi-Wan and Anakin for a private meeting in his chamber. When both entered, the Jedi Master noticed the expression of curiosity on their faces. Anakin, always impatient, was the first to speak, asking if there was a new mission. Yoda shook his head slowly and asked that both sit down. With a grave voice, he began to relate his visions. He described the masked warrior, the temple in flames, the name Darth Vader. Obi-Wan frowned, worried, while Anakin seemed restless, shifting his weight from one leg to the other. When Yoda revealed that both were somehow connected to this Sith, the silence that followed was profound. Master Yoda, how can we be linked to a Sith we don't yet know? Obi-Wan asked carefully. His voice carried respect but also skepticism. Anakin, in turn, seemed more defensive. He crossed his arms and said he had no connection whatsoever to the dark side. Yoda raised his small hand, asking for patience. Understand completely. I cannot, said the master, his inverted syntax revealing his concern. But real the threat is. Discover the truth we must. Together work we need. Obi-Wan nodded immediately. His loyalty to the Order was absolute. Anakin hesitated for a moment before agreeing as well. The three Jedi began to investigate. Yoda shared all the details he could remember from the visions, each fragment of image, each sensation. Obi-Wan suggested that perhaps Vader was an apprentice of Count Dooku's master. Anakin proposed that the visions might be showing only a possibility, not a certainty. Yoda agreed that the future was always in motion, but insisted that the threat was too real to be ignored. They spent hours discussing, meditating together, trying to unravel the mystery. The connection between Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Vader remained frustrating and elusive. Finally, Yoda decided it was time to involve the Jedi Council. He convened an extraordinary meeting and, before Mace Windu, Plo Koon, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and the other members, related his visions in detail. The council chamber fell silent as he spoke. Mace Windu was the first to respond, his voice firm but concerned. He asked if Yoda was certain it wasn't just a nightmare or a Sith manipulation. Plo Koon, always cautious, suggested it could be a trap to divert their attention from the current war. Ki-Adi-Mundi raised the question of how they should proceed without more concrete information. Yoda tapped his staff on the floor gently. "Ignore this, we cannot," he said firmly. "Prepared be, we must. Investigate more deeply, we need." Obi-Wan reported the discussions he had had with Yoda and Anakin, emphasizing the mysterious connection the visions suggested. Anakin remained quiet during most of the meeting, his face a mask of contemplation. The council decided they would increase their vigilance, investigate any suspicious Sith activity, and try to meditate collectively on Yoda's visions. The threat of Darth Vader, though still nebulous, was now known to the leaders of the Jedi Order. But time was running out faster than any of them could imagine. In the tense days that followed the council's deliberations, Anakin found himself increasingly divided between his responsibilities as a Jedi and his regular conversations with Chancellor Palpatine, who had become almost a father to him. During one of their private meetings in the Chancellor's luxurious office, Anakin casually mentioned, perhaps imprudently, Yoda's disturbing visions about a mysterious and powerful Sith called Darth Vader. He expected some wise advice from the Chancellor, perhaps an illuminated political perspective on how this would affect the Republic and the conduct of the war. But what Anakin did not perceive, blinded by his trust in the older man, was the subtle but significant change in Palpatine's expression. The Chancellor's eyes gleamed for a fraction of a second, a golden flash of recognition and, perhaps, deep concern or even calculated fear. Palpatine asked apparently innocent but carefully crafted questions about the specific details of the visions, about what else exactly Yoda had seen in those images of the future, about how the council was reacting and what measures they were taking. Anakin, unsuspecting, answered honestly all the questions, revealing more than he should have revealed. Alone in his office after Anakin departed with a promise to return soon, Palpatine, or rather, Darth Sidious in his true form, contemplated the very grave situation with a calculating mind. His fingers drummed rhythmically on the polished surface of his desk as he processed the devastating implications. Yoda was predicting the future with alarming precision. This was crystal clear now. The old Jedi Master had seen Anakin transformed into Vader with his characteristic mask and armor, had glimpsed the execution of Order 66 with its bloody consequences, had witnessed through the Force the destruction of the Order that was carefully orchestrated to happen. This was completely unacceptable and threatened everything he had built. His meticulous plans, woven patiently over entire decades of manipulation and deception, were at grave risk of being undone by an ancient Jedi of 900 years and his inconvenient prophetic visions. Sidious knew with certainty that he could not wait even one more day. The moment to execute Order 66 had arrived prematurely, even if it wasn't the absolutely perfect timing he had planned so carefully. He needed to act immediately, before the Jedi discovered much more and connected all the dots until they arrived at his true identity. With cold and cruel determination, without hesitation or remorse, Palpatine activated his encrypted holographic communicator that was hidden in a secret drawer. His authoritative voice echoed across the galaxy in coded transmission, reaching every clone commander on every distant world where the Jedi fought bravely alongside their troops. "Execute Order 66, he said simply, without elaboration or additional explanation. On Kashyyyk among the giant trees, on Utapau with its deep levels, on countless other planets scattered across the galaxy, the clones treacherously turned their weapons against the Jedi generals who had led and fought alongside them for years. The element of surprise was devastating and cruel in its efficiency. Jedi fell in shocking numbers before they even fully understood what was happening, betrayed by those they implicitly trusted. But on Coruscant, in the brilliant capital of the Republic, where most of the Council's most powerful masters remained in the historic temple, the situation was significantly different. The Jedi there were on maximum alert because of Yoda's terrifying visions, and this increased vigilance gave them a crucial advantage that would save countless lives. When the loyal clones of the Temple Guard suddenly opened fire without warning in the sacred corridors, Mace Windu reacted instantly with reflexes trained for decades. His distinctive purple saber blocked the deadly blaster shots as he shouted an urgent warning to the other nearby Jedi. Yoda, meditating quietly in his isolated chamber, felt the bitter betrayal through the Force even before the first fatal shots were fired in the lower levels. His eyes opened abruptly when shock waves coursed through the Force. Plo Koon was in the upper levels of the temple conducting training with Padawans when he sensed the danger and immediately began organizing the defense with military efficiency. Ki-Adi-Mundi, who was in the archives researching ancient Sith references, quickly gathered the available Jedi Knights and formed a strategic defensive barrier at the main entry points. Obi-Wan, who had recently returned from a brief diplomatic mission, activated his reliable blue saber and immediately began evacuating the terrified younglings to the safer and more fortified chambers of the temple. The terrible battle for the Jedi Temple had begun violently, and this time, different from Yoda's original vision, the Jedi were prepared and determined to fight to the last breath. The millenary corridors of the temple quickly transformed into chaotic and violent battlefields. Lightsabers hummed through the heavy air, blocking brilliant blaster bursts that ricocheted off the ancient walls. The clones, programmed and conditioned since birth, advanced in disciplined and relentless formation. But the Jedi, present in greater numbers than in any alternative timeline of history, resisted fiercely with all their skill and power. Yoda moved through the intense combats with surprising speed that defied his fragile appearance, his small green saber cutting blaster barrels and disarming clones without causing unnecessary casualties whenever possible. Mace Windu led a coordinated group of experienced Jedi Masters in the critical defense of the Council chambers and the sacred archives. Obi-Wan personally coordinated the protection of the youngest and most vulnerable, guaranteeing with iron determination that no innocent youngling would fall on that terrible night of betrayal. The situation was absolutely chaotic and desperate, but the Jedi were managing to hold their strategic positions against all odds. Meanwhile, in another sector of Coruscant, Anakin was in his modest apartment when he felt the massive disturbance in the Force like a physical blow. Padme was at his side on the sofa, pregnant with several months and visibly frightened by the urgent reports of violent combat in the Temple District arriving through news transmissions. Anakin knew he needed to act immediately, but was deeply divided by conflicting loyalties. He immediately thought of Palpatine, his mentor and friend. The Supreme Chancellor would have answers, would have some reasonable explanation for what was happening in the city. With a hurried promise to Padme that he would return in complete safety, Anakin kissed her forehead and ran toward the Senate building where the Supreme Chancellor's office was located. The fate of the entire galaxy was about to be definitely decided in the next critical hours, and Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one of ancient prophecies, was directly at the center of everything, exactly as Yoda's disturbing visions had repeatedly suggested. The Force was dramatically converging toward a singular critical point, and the choice of a single young Jedi would determine whether eternal darkness or eternal light would prevail over the galaxy for future generations. Anakin burst into Palpatine's luxurious office without ceremony or prior announcement, his steps echoing on the polished floor. His face was deeply marked by confusion, desperation, and barely contained anger as he demanded immediate answers from the Chancellor. The clones had treacherously turned against the Jedi without provocation. The sacred temple was under coordinated attack. His friends and masters were fighting for their lives, and he desperately needed to know what the hell was happening and who was responsible. Palpatine rose from his high chair slowly, deliberately, a carefully constructed expression of false concern and shock on his wrinkled face. He began to weave his elaborate and rehearsed narrative, speaking with a trembling voice about a supposed Jedi conspiracy to take absolute control of the Republic through a military coup, about how the Jedi had become too dangerous to be left unsupervised. But then, seeing that Anakin hesitated and didn't completely swallow the story, Palpatine changed tactics with the speed of a striking serpent. His eyes began to glow with a sickly yellowish tone as he slowly dropped the mask of benevolent politician he had worn for so long. The voice that emerged from his throat was deeper, more sinister, loaded with malignant power. The true voice of Darth Sidious, Dark Lord of the Sith. Anakin instinctively recoiled several steps, deeply shocked to the core. His political master, his close friend, his confidant of years, was a powerful Sith Lord hidden in plain sight. The revelation hit Anakin like a physical blow to the stomach, robbing his breath. Instinctively, without conscious thought, his hand went to his lightsaber attached to his belt. The bright and familiar blue illuminated dramatically the dark office as Anakin assumed the defensive combat posture he had practiced thousands of times. "You are a Sith," Anakin said, his voice visibly trembling with betrayal, anger, and mixed horror. "I must take you to the Jedi Council for trial." Palpatine laughed aloud, a cold, calculated sound completely devoid of genuine humor. He did not activate a lightsaber yet, just stood there calmly, his hands open in a gesture of apparent peaceful surrender. But his next words were as sharp as the deadliest blades. "You can arrest me if you insist, young Skywalker, but then your beloved Padme will die in childbirth, exactly as you saw in your visions. I am her only hope for survival." Padme's name pronounced so casually was like a brutal punch to Anakin's stomach, paralyzing him completely. He froze in place, his saber still lit and bright but his determination dangerously wavering. Palpatine continued relentlessly, his voice seductive and poisonous like poisoned honey. He spoke in specific details of Anakin's terrifying visions about Padme dying during childbirth, nighttime visions that tormented the young Jedi and that he had confidentially shared in secret only with Palpatine. The Chancellor solemnly promised that only the dark side of the Force could save her now. Only he had the forbidden and ancient knowledge to prevent her inevitable death. Anakin was being literally torn apart inside. His sacred duty as a Jedi clearly told him to arrest Sidious immediately and bring him to justice. But his overwhelming love for Padme, his paralyzing fear of losing her forever, completely clouded his judgment and his connection with the Force. He looked at his lit saber trembling in his hand, then at Palpatine waiting patiently, then back at the saber. Tears of frustration began to form in his eyes. Slowly, terribly, in one of the most tragic moments of galactic history, Anakin deactivated his lightsaber. The blue blade retracted with a hissing sound of defeat. He fell heavily to his knees before Palpatine, his head low in complete and humiliating submission. "What must I do, Master?" Anakin asked, his voice breaking with emotion, tears now running freely down his cheeks. Palpatine smiled triumphantly, a terrible smile of absolute victory. He placed a cold and possessive hand on Anakin's shoulder and pronounced the words that would resonate through history forever. "Rise, Darth Vader. You will be my new apprentice, powerful beyond measure." The name echoed in the opulent office, reverberating on the walls, and suddenly, like lightning striking through his mind, Anakin remembered Yoda's visions, the masked warrior who would completely destroy the Jedi Order. The connection between him, Obi-Wan, and this mysterious Sith. He was Darth Vader from the visions. He would be the instrument of destruction of everything he loved, of everyone who trusted him. The realization hit Anakin like a cosmic lightning bolt. Anakin slowly raised his eyes, and Palpatine saw something there that made him hesitate for the first time. It wasn't submission or acceptance. It was pure determination and righteous anger. In an explosive movement fueled by the Force, Anakin activated his saber again and attacked with dazzling speed. Palpatine, caught completely by surprise by this impossible twist, retreated quickly as his own red saber emerged from the sleeve of his robes like a striking serpent. The combat that followed was fierce, brutal, and destructive beyond anything the office had witnessed. Palpatine attacked with blinding speed that could barely be followed by the human eye. Anakin defended and counterattacked with everything he had, his technique sharpened by righteous anger and the terrifying fear of what he had almost irrevocably become. They systematically destroyed the office. Ancient and expensive furniture was reduced to burned pieces. Marble statues were split in half, panoramic windows shattered into millions of brilliant fragments that fell like deadly rain. Palpatine repeatedly tried to use devastating Force lightning, blue energy crackling from his twisted hands, but Anakin blocked them with his vibrating saber, advancing step by step through the excruciating pain. The end of the epic combat came when Anakin, in a singular moment of pure connection with the Force uncorrupted by darkness, foresaw with perfect clarity Palpatine's next move. When the desperate Sith Lord launched an especially powerful attack of concentrated lightning, channeling decades of accumulated hatred, Anakin deliberately absorbed them into his violently vibrating saber and advanced directly through the unbearable pain that burned every nerve in his body. With a primal scream of supreme effort, he cut upward in a perfect ascending arc. Palpatine's head separated from his body with a horrible sound and fell heavily on the polished floor. The body of the Emperor who would never be crowned collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. Anakin staggered backward, his entire body covered with terrible and painful burns from the Sith lightning. He fell heavily to his knees, panting and groaning with pain, gravely wounded but alive. Sidious was dead, definitely dead. The millenary Sith threat had been eliminated by his own hands. But at what terrible cost to his body and spirit? At the Jedi Temple, miles away, the battle was finally coming to an end after hours of intense combat. With the most powerful masters present and in large defensive numbers, the Jedi had miraculously managed to deactivate or repel most of the clones. Yoda felt through the Force, clear as a ringing bell, when Palpatine died violently. The dark presence that had hovered over Coruscant for so long simply disappeared like mist in the sun. He also felt Anakin's intense pain, his grave wounds, but also, more importantly, his redemption and choice for the light. The small master closed his tired eyes and murmured with deep satisfaction. Balance to the Force he brought finally. The Chosen One, truly he is, as the ancient prophecies predicted. When Anakin returned to the temple several hours later, gravely wounded and exhausted to the bone, supported by loyal Republican guards, he confessed everything to the council gathered in emergency session. He revealed who Palpatine really was, how he had almost fallen into absolute darkness, and how Yoda's prophetic visions had saved him at the last possible critical moment. Mace Windu listened with a severe expression and crossed arms, but even he, with all his rigidity, could not deny that Anakin had definitively destroyed the Sith and saved the Republic. Anakin knew deeply in his heart that he could not continue as an active Jedi, not after everything that had happened. He had touched the darkness, had felt its seductive attraction, had almost irrevocably become Darth Vader. With the solemn permission of the Council and their blessings, he honorably retired from the Order without dishonor. He took Padme, now in the last months of pregnancy, to Naboo where she was born, far from the intrigues and dangers of Coruscant. There, in peace and tranquility, she gave birth to healthy twins, Luke and Leia, both strong in the Force. Anakin lived as a common man for years, actively helping to rebuild the fragmented Republic alongside dedicated senators like Bail Organa. But when Luke turned 7, something powerful awakened in the boy. The Force was incredibly strong with him, stronger than with any child in generations. Yoda, still alive despite his advanced age and still wise as ever, personally visited Naboo on a special trip. "Return, his father must to the temple," said Yoda to Luke with a soft but firm voice. "And you, my new Padawan, will be, if you accept this path." Anakin hesitated deeply, looking at Padme for guidance, but she nodded with an encouraging smile. She had always known this day would eventually come. Thus, Anakin Skywalker returned to the Jedi Order as a respected master, with his son Luke as his dedicated apprentice. The dark legacy of Darth Vader remained only as a terrifying vision, a shadow of what could have been but never was. Anakin had chosen the light at the most critical moment, and the entire galaxy was saved as a result. The prophesied balance in the Force, finally, had been achieved through sacrifice and the right choice.